Okay, everybody, I think we can get started. Thank you all so much for coming. This is the kickoff meeting for the Feed the Future Current and Emerging Threats to Crops Innovation Lab. This was begun on the 30th of September 2021, and this is our first broad meeting, the objective of which is to bring together our partners who are already currently working very actively on the project. So for each of those partners who is on the call today, of course, you know very well that we've been meeting on a weekly cadence and working on a wide range of problems. And to our mind, everything's gone extremely well. So thank you so much for being excellent first-year partners. But we also, of course, wanted to have a meeting such that we could bring you together. I know some of you are already working very effectively with each other, but we wanted to bring the broader group together, as well as to introduce the community to what we're doing, which is why we've opened up this beginning meeting to whomever wanted to come. I think we've had over 110 people register, which is great. And then I'm sure we'll hear that ping as we go forward, as more people are joining and being admitted. So what we want to do is sort of introduce ourselves and the overall efforts, as well as the broader team. So let me just start that process.
Management team.
Okay, great. So this is the kickoff meeting for the Current Emerging Threats to Crops Innovation Lab. And this is the schedule today. We're going to be rather loose, but we just want to start off with an introduction to the team and our quick win partners. And then we'll go into broader discussions. We want to talk about the mission of the Innovation Lab, and then talk about the critically important aspects of research for development. Now, on Tuesday and Wednesday, we continue this tomorrow and Wednesday. On Tuesday, we'll talk about the RFA process and how we're going to be dispersing funds in the coming years, and then what we want from an RFA process. And on Wednesday, we're going to talk about some biological details of the current and emerging threats, as well as the abiotic factors. So these innovation labs, for those who don't know, are set up by a management entity, which Penn State is very proud to be. So my name is David Hughes. I'm the director. I'm the Doherty and Lloyd Hook Chair in Global Food Security at Penn State. And I'll hand over to Serge to give his introduction, and we'll go down the list.
Hi, everyone. My name is Serge, and I'm the Associate Director for the Innovation Lab. Nice to meet you all, and thank you for coming.
Annalise?
Yep, thank you. So welcome, everyone. My name is Annalise Kays. I'm the Operations Director for the Innovation Lab, and I'm excited to be here with you. On to Melissa. Melissa, you're muted.
Hello, thank you. My name is Melissa Ishler. I'm the Administrative Assistant for the Feed the Future Innovation Lab, and I help with all things financial. So it's wonderful to be here, and welcome all.
Great. Janelle or Paige or Fate?
I'm Janelle Larson. I think maybe Paige couldn't make it this morning. I'm one of the several gender specialists, and we'll be working with all of you to integrate gender considerations in your research and outreach efforts. Maybe Faith is still.
Deanna, are you here perhaps?
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Deanna Bering. I'm the Assistant Dean for Ag Sciences Global in Penn State's College of Agricultural Sciences, and here to support David and his team administratively as things continue to grow.
Super, thank you so much, Deanna. Ed, are you here?
No.
No problem. So Ed is our IPM specialist who brings a huge amount of experience based upon his previous efforts with the IPM Innovation Lab. And then the next are our data analyst and GIS expert, Derek Moore and Edward Amoa.
I'm Derek Moore. I'm a data scientist on the team, kind of do data wrangling. That's kind of my specialty here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Edward Amor, and I'm a data analyst in GIS. Thank you.
Super, thanks. Pete.
Hi, everyone. I'm Pete McCloskey. I'm the AI engineer, and I specialize in computer vision. It's great to meet everyone.
Frank.
Hi, everybody. I'm Frank Doyle. I'm a software engineer, and I take care of all the Android apps.
And last but certainly not least, Mercy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marceline Tata. I'm the media coordinator for the Innovation Lab and excited to be here.
Super, thanks everybody. And so, of course, we have oversight by the excellent USAID team. So, Angela, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Angela Records. I'm a science advisor at USAID's Bureau for Resilience and Food Security and the deputy lead for our Bureau's research community of practice. So Zach will be 30 minutes late. I'm not sure if Kate is here. Are you here, Kate?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning. Hi, I'm Kate Planley. I serve as activity manager for our USAID team, and I'm an international research advisor. Nice to meet everybody. Back to you, David.
Thanks, Kate. Angela, would you like to spend just a minute broadly what the Innovation Labs do on their Feed the Future?
Sure. So we're really excited to be participating in this long-awaited kickoff for the current emerging threats to crops innovation lab. It's one of 21 innovation labs that the Bureau is supporting right now. And these are US university-led activities that partner with folks around the world to solve food security challenges. They're broadly focusing on various commodities or particular areas of challenges such as threats to crops. Yeah, so that's kind of the overall view of the innovation labs.
Super, and we'll come on to this later on in the day. Thank you. And we also have a board. I want to ask the board to introduce themselves, but we're very happy to be able to draw on a broad range of people. We have 4 so far, and we're probably aiming for another person and the board. So we have Dr. Stefan Tuben from the University of Maryland, Eastern Shore, Dr. Jean Rustiano from North Carolina State University, and then Dr. Marichellis Achivado from Cornell, and Anna from CGIL. So it's really excellent to have those as our board members guiding us as we go. So the Innovation Lab had the opportunity to choose quick win partners, and these are the partners for year 1. And so here they are arrayed, and we're going to go through a brief introduction to each of them. So let us start off with the Dream Team Agro Consultancy. John and Wincott.
Hi, everyone. My name is John. Part of the Dream Team Agro Consultancy, and I'm here with my colleague Wincott. She'll introduce the team. Wincott.
Project in 10 counties, of which we are undertaking the IPM packages. And in these counties, the counties we are undertaking this project are Bomet, Bungoma, Busia, Homa Bay, Kakamega, Kilifi, Siaya, Trans Nzoia, Uasin Gishu, and Vihiga. So these IPM packages, they include the control of fall armyworm using the parasitoids. Then we have the intercropping, of which we are using the desmodium or the beans. And also we have the third package, which is the control of striga using the Kichawikil technology. Then the further package is we are using conservation agriculture, of which we are using the Zypits. And also the last one we are using the last package is the MLND, of which we are using the resistant seeds from CMITs. So that is those are the 10 counties we are undertaking this project, and the 5 packages we are undertaking. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And we're really proud to start off with Dream Team Agro Consultancy as the first partner to introduce, because that project is really aiming for the ambition of integrated pest management at scale. In addition to being across 10 counties, we're scaling out the advice to between 6 and 8 million people every week. A large component of this innovation lab and other innovation labs is capacity building. So we're extremely proud that WinKit is overseeing a very large team of young people who are enhancing their capacity to run these large experimental trials. It's really, really quite fantastic. So thank you, WinKit and John. So our next partner is ICIPE. So I'll just jump in for them. And ICIPE is, of course, one of the many centers of CGIR that we have historically worked with and continue to work with under the auspice of the Innovation Lab. And they're, of course, extremely well known in understanding pest insects as well as beneficial insects like parasitoids, which are employed in problems like fall armyworm. So we've been really happy to have conducted a trial with them before the Innovation Lab has started. And now through WinKit and John, Dr. Jalal, we're scaling that up. So we're delivering IPM at scale with parasitoids, training young people in the rearing of parasitoids. And then with the university that Dr. Jalal is from, Moy University, building a satellite campus. One of the roles of ICIPE will be performing research on the economics of integrated pest management. It is cheaper than using synthetic pesticides and more efficacious. So we want to analyze that in order to understand the possible frictions for scaling. And our next partner is IDE. I see we have Ditya and Corey, perhaps.
Hi, everyone. I'm Corey. I'm country director for IDE Nepal. We are really, I think, launching the Dream Team in Nepal, in Asia, all of Asia, I think, for the first time. And so our role with the IDE subaward, it's relatively small, relatively short timing for this phase. We have a Dream Team already out in the field, already collecting data. That's just been we, I believe, got started a little bit later than some of the other projects, so it's really just getting going. But it's exciting to see people already at work in the field.
Great, thank you so much, Corey. So a request I had is that we slow down, and I slow down, especially because for some of our partners in West Africa. So let's try to, I'll try and mirror that and to sort of speak a little bit more slowly so our partners in West Africa can understand this. But thank you so much, Corey and Ditya, for being here. The next is Gear, who have worked with a wide range of innovation labs. So perhaps Janelle or Paige.
Sure. So GEAR is a multidisciplinary research and outreach initiative based at Penn State in the College of Ag under Global Ag. And so we do both research and training in gender equity and gender considerations. So we're looking forward to partnering with all of you. As I'm sure you're all aware, women are a significant part of the ag labor force globally, but they face significant constraints in terms of access to information, inputs, land, and globally women are more time constrained than men. So we want to think carefully about how that affects and the implications that has for our research and for our implementation. So when we're collecting data for research, we want to be sure to collect sex disaggregated data. And maybe it's a given, but we explicitly want to talk to women about their decision-making ability, their control of income, et cetera. And then when we're thinking about outreach and implementation, we want to make sure that our projects are able to reach everyone that they're intended to reach, including women and other marginalized populations. So that might mean that we need to think carefully about where we have our outreach, when we have it. And sometimes people think of gender considerations as primarily something that we do for women and as something to be nice to women. But we want to keep in mind that we're not able to meet our objectives if we ignore the gender implications. How does our intervention affect household decision making? How does it affect time allocation or labor allocation within the household? If we don't take that into consideration, we won't be able to meet the goals that we're laying out there. So we will be reaching out to folks on this call to see how we can partner with you, maybe get a short list of your research objectives and your outreach activities, just to start to be able to layer in gender considerations for all of that.
Thank you so much. So it's really excellent to have Dr. Larson and Dr. Paige Castellanos joining us, because they bring a lot of deep expertise working across a number of innovation historically and also concurrently. And they're joined by a third member, Faith Aroni, who is a young person in Kenya who did her degree or undergraduate degree in aspects of gender issues. So not only does she bring that from a Kenyan perspective, but she's also the daughter of one of our farmers. You can see one of our farmers here in this picture, looking at our integrated pest management guide from Feed the Future. Faith is the daughter of Madam Consolata, and so brings that important component. So she's one of the Dream Team members. You'll hear more about as Innovation Lab continues, but thank you so much indeed, Janelle. Next is Inara from Burkina Faso. We know there have been connection issues, so I don't know if Serge, you would like to lead this.
Hello.
Hi, Alexander.
Yes, I'm Sawaduga Lizeta, and I represent the Dream Team of Burkina Faso in Iraq. So we have 3 points. Well, in adaptive research and diffusion on new EPM package, management of fruit and vegetable crop pest and disease, and surveillance of pest and disease in fruit and vegetable crops. These points represent the summary of what we plan to do. We propose this because from our observation in vegetable field crops, we noticed that the attack of the pest and disease start from the nursery. So we want to train the producer in the technique of obtaining healthy seed and healthy nursery, and how to use a local plant as bypass pesticides. There is also the mealybug of papaya, which is a real scourge in 2 areas of Burkina Faso, where it will be necessary to quickly train producer on the knowledge and management of this pest. In 2015, our institute was alerted by many mango producers of the presence of dieback in their mango orchids. Since then, a study was conducted and a number of technological packages were developed that we intend to popularize within the framework of this project. Finally, in order to prevent emerging disease and pest, an epidemiological surveillance will be carried out with the plant village team. So I'm finished and I thank you. I'm not an Anglophone.
No, that's very, very good. Thank you very much, Dr. Swadogo. And so I think the point there is that we want to, of course, look for emerging threats. And I think the work package that Dr. Sawadago outlined really does get to that. And it's something we want to see across other partners. So thank you so much indeed for joining.
Okay, thank you.
Our next partner is also a land grant. We don't typically think of them as a land grant, but MIT are, and it's great to have Chris to represent what's happening from MIT.
Yeah, hello. So I'm Chris Rakakis from the MIT Julia Lab group. So what we've been working on with this project is essentially, there's so many different ways that the data is being incorporated, and many times this needs to make use of mechanistic modeling along with the data. And we've been helping with the creation of new methods for helping to get that these methods up and running quicker, right? So how do you get new predictive methods onto the field, and how do you make sure that they're more predictive by, allowing the use of prior known information and incorporating that into the machine learning. So we've been working with individuals at PSU, and getting this to getting newer, faster methods for getting these partial differential equation simulators going, making it easier for the scientific knowledge to be able to be spit down into a script and get that running quickly. Also incorporating machine learning into this, so that way a starting set of equations or a starting predictive formula can be written and then be automatically updated through these kind of machine learning techniques.
Great, thank you so much, Chris. And if I bring together INERA and MIT, it's critically important that we push forward research in agricultural scientific machine learning, because there's a lot of, for emerging threats, we're going to just have a small amount of data. And so using this framework will help us understand that data or the threat before it becomes endemic. If you remember back to the fall armyworm crisis as it came into West Africa in 2016, we're trying to build a system that would allow us to more rapidly identify that threat before it eventually spreads to 70 countries and becomes endemic. Thank you so much, Chris, for that. Our next partner is Michigan State University. Kareem?
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Kareem Maradia. We are honored to be partnering with the CETC Innovation Lab, and our role is primarily on training and capacity building, and we have 4 of us, our faculty members, engaged. And the 3 areas that we are focusing is, one is on the weed management, led by Dr. Christy Sprague, and nematodes management, led by Marisol Quintanilla, and then the training programs, which are led by myself and Dr. Kalista Rakhmatov. So our broader interest is training and capacity building, which USAID strongly emphasizes, and we look forward to working with the partners around the world. Thank you, David.
Thank you so much indeed, Kareem. It's great to have MSU on board, particularly because you bring so much experience in running innovation labs and already have been a tremendous help to us. So thank you so much indeed for that.
Yeah, and we have 2 workshops coming up. One will focus on the project management, which we will be in touch with you shortly. And the second training program will focus on the just a short course on current and emerging threats. So both of these programs will be offered virtually.
Super. Yeah, we're going to announce those on our website very soon. Thank you so much. Our next partner is University of Maryland, Eastern Shore, and Dr. Stefan Tubene should be here and can present what's happening.
Yes, David, thank you. And good morning, everybody, and welcome. My name is Stefan Tubene. I am an agricultural economist by training, and I'm from one of the 1890 institutions, or HBCU in the United States. Our role in the center, in the innovation lab, will be to participate in the screening of the RFA, but also implement specific projects. So right now, we do have 2 ongoing projects that we intend to start this coming summer. One focusing on banana virus, and then another one on post-harvesting of mango and maize. The banana one is in DRC Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo. And then the mango is in Kenya. So we have a diverse group of scientists in this project. Of course, the Kenya effort will be led by Dr. Caleb Nindo, and the DRC effort will be led by myself. So I think earlier I saw my partners here, Dr. Nindo, who is a food science specialist, and Dr. Simon Zebelo, originally from Ethiopia, and is entomologists. So, and then I have another group of people, plant breeders, Dr. Dekni, who is from India, actually. And then a gentleman from Ghana, who is specialist in toxicology, because with post-harvest loss, we'll be looking into aflatoxin in maize. And we also have Dr. Hashem, who is Egyptian, focusing more on legume. Dr. Degni is a plant breeder. So just briefly, Dr. Nindo, if you are here, and Dr. Zebelos, if you can say a word.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tibene. My name, again, as Dr. Tibene has said, Caleb Nindo. I'm a food scientist, food engineer by profession, and currently directing the Food and Agricultural Sciences PhD program here at the University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. And very excited, especially to learn about the work that the DREAM team is doing. And we hope to be able to team up together with them to work in the areas of post-harvest mango and maize problems in Kenya and other areas in East and Central Africa. Thank you.
Dr. Zebelo, do you want to say a word, please?
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It depends where you are. This is Simon Zibelo from the University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. I am an entomologist with interest on integrated pest management. I'll try to work on this project on assisting something related with insect pest management. Of course, I will definitely involve on those two projects, especially with the project in DRC that will be focused on the virus of cassava and banana and plantains. So on that project, I will work how insect vectors might transmit those viruses, and I will offer my help somehow on the insect pest management aspect of that project. Of course, I will work also with Dr. Nindo on the maize and mango post-harvest loss reduction strategy in Kenya, where I can see how post-harvest insect pests also contribute to those alpha toxin and other aspects of this project. So that's me. It's great to hear all of you here. There are a lot of interesting projects out there. Thank you.
David, I don't think I saw any other member now, so I'll give it back to you.
Thank you so much indeed. So one of the great things about University of Maryland Eastern Shore, large existing project that Dr. Tubene has across 19 HBCUs, which is really a major, one of the major efforts that we want to do is to reach out broadly. Of course, this is something reflected by by USAID, the recent visits of the administrative power to the historically Black and underrepresented universities and the minority serving institutions really drives home this point. But in addition, what we've come to discover about UMass is what was reflected in the three speakers, one from DRC, one from Kenya, one from Ethiopia originally. And there's just a great diversity of experiences among their faculty across many, many countries and systems. And that diversity is critically important as we are trying to deal with current and emerging threats, because they have firsthand experience of them in not only their own countries, but a variety of other countries. So I think that has been a phenomenal experience for us to learn about in these few short months we've been working together. So excellent partners, and thank you very much indeed for being here this morning. Our next partner is representing the region in Central America and the Caribbean, which includes Honduras, Guatemala, and Haiti. And then, so Ari, if you'd like to introduce yourself and the team.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, all. My name is Ari Sanders. I'm working at Zamorano University, Honduras. We are coordinating the DREAM team in Central America. At this moment, we are starting this working together with SIP from Peru to establish 4 farm field schools, working with local partners, including Indigenous Women Group, private producers, small producer organization, and National Research Institute. We're working now on late blight in potato farming, and what we're trying to do is to introduce Nuru, to not only introduce Nuru at with those groups, but trying to analyze also how we can introduce Nuru and also in other kind of crops. At this moment, we're working on potatoes, and we're looking forward to work also in coffee, corn, and beans. And at this moment, we already contacted Guatemala, and hopefully we can also work in Haiti with the same methodology. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much indeed. So then, as we mentioned previously, we have ICIPE is one of the CGIR systems, centers of the broader system, which is now being reorganized into one CGIR. One of our long-term partners at CGIR is the Potato Institute, which is located in Peru, but operates globally. And so Jan, if you'd like to introduce the work that you're doing.
Sure. So my name is Jan Kreuze, and I'm the leader of the Crop and System Sciences at the International Potato Center. Originally, we were going to work on viruses and virus surveillance using high-throughput sequencing in this project. But then as the project started up and in consultation with our partners, we figured out there are quicker wins and more priority areas that we can work on. So we switched to late blight, which is a major problem globally. And there are kind of 3 things we're going to do here during this first year. One is to perform genotyping and surveillance and genotyping of potato late blight to monitor changes that are happening, because with the increase importation of potato seeds from Europe, there's been an increase in new, more aggressive strains that are pesticide resistance coming in, and there's not a system in place to monitor these things. And so we're gonna try to start that up again using high throughput sequencing approach. Then we will establish and validate a decision support system for fungicide applications to manage late blight in Kenya, but we'll also do that in Honduras. And this is a handheld decision support system, so it's a farmer-based system thing with circles, and they can rely on their own memory and the type of variety that they've grown to be able to decide when and what to apply. And this reduces the use of fungicides, which is always good. And then we will develop a yield loss model for late blight, specifically parameterized for varieties in Kenya, and which is the other part of the coin, to be able to understand what are the losses that are being caused by late blight when you get a new fungicide resistant strain coming in or whatever. So I think these are the 3 things.
Great, thank you very much, Jan. So that reminds me to mention something about that early change that we made from West Africa to now Kenya. One of the things that we advocated in our proposal, and we've seen demonstrated already, is this concept of adaptive management. With current and emerging threats to crops, we really have to follow what's happening on the ground with the abiotic stressors, which is climate change, and the biotic stressors, which are the pests, weeds, and diseases we're focused on. Now, one of those important components will be an increase or a decrease in the severity of the pathogen as it spreads, or how climate change interacts with the pathogen. And that's the concept of virulence. And we want to make sure that we have this adaptive management. So the Penn State team is coming from a broader community at Penn State, which is called the Center for Infectious Disease Dynamics. And I see Andrew Reed is on the call here. And we really want to, and they're focused on diseases of animals like foot and mouth disease, or diseases of humans like measles or Ebola or COVID, of course. And so in those cases, you have to react depending on the information you received, and react adaptively. And we were really happy that we were able to work with SIP and then the Kenyan government, and also, of course, USAID, to have that rapid change, because sometimes large institutional structures don't have that adaptability. And we've been able to show we could adopt it both for moving to Kenya and Honduras rather early. So we're obviously going to continue in that rapid pivoting where the diseases demand we go. So thank you very much, Jan. Our next partner is CIMIT and the John Innes Centre in the UK. So Dave and Dan.
Yeah, thanks, David. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I'm Dave Hodson from CIMIT. So we're working together with Diane Saunders at the John Innes Centre in the UK, and then also with partners in Kenya and Nepal as well. So a couple of areas we're working on. So the first one's MARPL. So this is this mobile real-time plant disease diagnostic system that's been developed by Diane at John Innes. So this is using nanopore sequencing, and essentially it's a lab in a suitcase. So we've got this up and running for wheat yellow rust. So we're going to be setting up this system in both Kenya and Nepal. So it's giving in-country capacity to do this novel diagnostics. And we'll also expand the technology to bring in wheat stem rust as well. So this diagnostics, it gives us a strain level diagnostic within 2 days. So that gives us the option to pick up new strains and then introduce them into early warning forecasting systems that we already have running. We'll also be working with Nuru, so the Penn State team, but also with IDE in Nepal and the DREAM team in Kenya. So bringing in the AI automated detection for the wheat rust diseases. So again, we can bring this into the early warning, the forecasting systems that we have running. So those are the key activities we'll be starting off with the innovation lab.
Thank you, Dave. I'm just distracting you because the computer is doing something funny here, but let me do that. I was just going to try and replay the video which shows the advanced AI that Pete McCloskey, our lead AI engineer, has been developing. And what it does is it combines, it uses an approach called segmentation. So the idea is that we would combine this with genetic testing, so we could have advanced phenotyping and advanced genotyping rapidly happening without an internet connection, and then combine that with the forecasting that is so critical and important, whether that's standard epidemiological forecasting, the sort of stuff that Chris from MIT has talked about, or some that involves other approaches. And so that's the idea to integrate multiple sources of information to make informed decisions. Great. So that really brings us nicely onto what our role is. Penn State is the management entity. So we oversee the broader project. We bring together the partners, as you've seen in the first year, and then we'll talk tomorrow about what second, third, and fourth, and fifth years will look like. But it's going to be an open, collaborative process, as we're going to hear about from the community about what are the biggest and most important threats. So our job is to run the administrative part, disperse grants, evaluate the performance of those grants, and work actively to build partnerships. But we are, of course, a research-based organization ourselves. So one of the goals that we have is to bring our pre-existing platform, Plant Village, and then determine how might we use the existing technology that we've built here to serve the Feed the Future countries, and particularly serve them in terms of rapid dissemination of information, and then an evaluation of the benefits of that information. So one of the things we're currently doing, and you can see in the bottom right there, is delivering outputs from FuseNet, which are meteorological models. We're delivering that now to all 21 Feed the Future countries, and we want to evaluate whether that's changing behavior. Already we see it is changing behavior. We can look at the map of Kenya and we can see all of this red area, which means in the next 5 days, it's receiving between 0 and 5 millimeters of rain. And we know that has already impacted the movement of pastoralist communities. 80% of Kenya is arid dry land. And so the pastoralists, of course, are moving to areas where there's water and vegetation. So we're delivering a product which is changing their behavior, which of course is important for reducing conflicts in the area, as well as human suffering and then animal suffering. And so different countries will have different responses to this data, and we're going to evaluate what those responses. And we have a very deep partnership with FuseNet, have done throughout the locust crisis. And of course, FuseNet is one of these phenomenally excellent examples of the importance of the United States government in investing in technology. I think over 20 years now of investment, which is really making a difference on the ground. Another component of what we at Penn State will be doing as a management entity is bringing in scaling partners. So the same screenshot you see in the bottom right for Feed the Future, you can see all the reports from the last week of people using the app, for example, which diseases are where, and people can drill into that. We're currently working with Google on a new product that they have very successfully developed in Bangladesh and now want to roll out across Africa. And that is using advanced hydrological models with satellite data in order that we might predict riverine floods, which of course are huge problems for agriculture, because the floods will affect the productivity in the fields. Of course, it's also a huge problem because it just directly kills people. And so we want to give accurate predictions of these floods to farmers and community members across the Feed the Future countries and across Africa broadly. Now, of course, we don't expect that farmers and community members are using our platform. Our platform is used by ministries of agriculture, CGIR, FAO, etc. And so the way in which we reach community members is through our widespread dissemination of knowledge. In the locust crisis, we were reaching 16 million people a week in Kenya, Ethiopia, and Somalia. Now in Kenya, through Shamba Shape Up, we're reaching about 8 million. And then we've just expanded into Burkina Faso through another TV program called Anusa Meg. And we're reaching about 6 million people, or 6 million people on TV, and then a number of other individuals, about 7 million via radio. In addition, we reach community members via SMS. We reach about 600,000 people every week now, SMS, and we have the whole system built, and that enables new countries to scale up and use that system. And that would be really helpful to send out alerts about floods, about pests, about drought, etc., to community members, and then provide them the ability to respond. Another component is AI as a service. We're rather proud that we were able to work separately through a World Bank project, but that computer vision model that I showed earlier, we were able to do something similar. It's called object detection, but it's similar in terms. And we were able to set that up for coffee rust in Uganda in just 30 days. So from the first picture taken in the field to the demonstration model, just 30 days. And that really strikes home the importance of platforms in being able to respond and build upon previous successes. For those of you who are partners, you're of course very familiar with our weekly meetings and our objectives and key results, which is a framework that we've adopted from Google through previous funding from Eric Schmidt, and that was very successful during the low crisis. If you need to scale, and we want to scale to hundreds of millions of people, if you need to scale, you need to have a very robust framework. And private industry, Google, Uber, Airbnb, etc., they've really developed very good systems for tracking scale approaches at scale and implementing those. A component of that, which is related, which is our data collection tool. So we are developing and providing, as well as building capacity among country partners to use open data kits, or ODK, as well as our cloud services. So when data is coming back into the Penn State system, we're able to combine that with about 7 or 8 different satellite streams to help people make informed decisions and leverage the data to have enhanced benefits from that. And then the final part is to provide Penn State accounts. Of course, as a land-grant university, it's Michigan State, MIT, Penn State, or UMass, we're able to bring a lot of systems, our library systems, our software systems. So some of our young people are trialing out access to those where we can provide information. So Mercy Tata is an example of that, where she has a Penn State account now, and then she's using the services from Adobe to email to cloud storage, all the sort of stuff that we take for granted, but it's not universally accessible, and we want to build that. So we wanted to stop at this moment from introducing the team to just kind of hearing back from you all if you had initial questions, and then we'll go on to another segment later on, which is what's the mission of the Innovation Lab. But any initial questions from the broad community here on what we're doing, please do just speak up or put it in the chat. While that's happening, we're just going to run 2 polls to get a flavor of who's all here. So please ask any questions you have. And please don't be shy. We'll need a brave soul to break the silence.
I think Jan, go ahead.
Yeah, I raised my hand. I was just waiting patiently. That's okay. Yeah, so I think there's a whole bunch of partners involved using different technologies. Are there any plans kind of to see how these technologies can be made more generic and used out over different types of approaches? I'm thinking, for example, I saw the coffee rust thing in Uganda. We work with the national program here. We're also on coffee rust. Could the same app be used here? We're doing some nanopore sequencing with them on coffee rust to understand the strains that are out here. Can we learn something from Marple? You know, things like that.
That's such a good question. It seems like it was planted. No, that's exactly the idea. The idea is that we would, so we want to develop locally and scale globally. So we develop it locally in Uganda for their problem. But once we have that, then anybody can immediately use it in the platform. Now, once it starts being used in Uganda, we might have responses. Actually, Pete, would you like to speak about the IITA experience and what happened in Cambodia?
Yeah, so essentially we had developed the cassava model through collecting data in East Africa. And then once we actually found a farmer using our cassava model in Southeast Asia, in Cambodia, where they were growing different varieties. And so we experienced some sort of a drop off in accuracy because of the phenotypes in our training data did not match the phenotypes in Southeast Asia. So we're absolutely interested in exploring how generic our models are, especially if our training data is all coming from one location. It's incredibly interesting to see if we can scale that out to other locations or if we're needing to collect additional training data.
And we also noticed that so one component of the approach is surveillance and then sanitary surveillance. So you look for a problem and then you have some IPM approach in order to deal with that. We found that was replicated independently between Kenya and Cote d'Ivoire. And so that's another way in which what happens in one country can transpose. You also ask about the genetic testing. One of the specific objectives of the Innovation Lab, which is an ambitious one, but within 3 years, we want any Feed the Future country to have a genetic determination of any pest inside their country. And that's a really, really ambitious goal. But if we don't push for such a strong goal, then the problem, as you've identified, and particularly as Diane Saunders at John Innes Center identifies, is that, sorry, Dave Hodson identified with Diane, is that the pathogen is not identified. And we all know about the wheat rust UG99 pathogen, which was considered very problematic and could sweep across large areas. We need to know rapidly whether the pathogen new strain. And I think with the last 2 years, we've all had a masterclass in strain identification through things like Delta and Omicron. And we hope that on the back of that, there's going to be increased enthusiasm and push for setting up these diagnostic services. So one thing is identifying the disease phenotypically, the other is genetics. And then the third component is, if you have those pieces of information, how can you do forecasting so that people are prepared? Or what are the IPM solutions that are working, like the parasitoid release? How can we scale that out to Burkina Faso or Ethiopia or Tanzania, etc.? And so the platform technology enables that. That's why we were able, the global community was able to develop the COVID vaccine in such a short period of time, because it built on the mRNA platform. And we want to take the same logic. So your question is very well phrased and very important for us going forward. Thanks. So while people are thinking about our next question, we had the poll results that I hope everybody can see, which is excellent. 43% of the people on the call are less than 30 years old. So in the Innovation Lab, we're of course really focusing on young people. That's really impressive. Okay. And then we can ask the second question, Annalise. Well, thanks, super. Okay, so any other questions from people out there?
David, this is Caleb Nindo. I just wanted to ask, with the various projects that this Innovation Lab is running, how are you involving students, for example, from the different countries and the universities that are involved in the innovation project?
Great. Maybe I could give that question to Dr. Chalal. John, maybe you could speak about your experience with the Dream Team and the origination of that.
Sure, David. We have the Dream Team, which is basically 95% composed of fresh and young graduates. The idea was, could we engage, so one of the big challenges was with unemployment. So we have, in a year, tons of youth being channeled out from the universities with very few opportunities. And so 3 years ago, we came up with the thought, how could we engage young youth fresh from the university to work with and for the farmers? So they're working alongside the farmers in bringing technology, trainings, and so forth. And so we started off with 10 of them, but 3 years ago now, we have now over 100 of them spread across Kenya. We have a team in Burkina Faso. As we talk, we have a team being trained in Mozambique and Tanzania right now. And so Uganda just came on board a month ago. And that's the idea, to engage young people fresh from the university to work with the farmers and train them and provide these solutions for the farmers. So that's the Dream Team in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think two of our team members are, I think it's Winnie and Liverson, perhaps, or have gone to Mozambique, or Lawrence. But and then last week, so I didn't mention Bapana Timilsena, and she wasn't officially part of the Innovation Lab when we started, but has been tremendously important she got a PhD here at Penn State, and now she's a postdoc with the Plant Village. But she comes originally from Nepal. So Bapana, could you speak to the training that happened between Kenya and Nepal, please?
Yeah, so we have just started gym team in Nepal, and the main so we hired these recent graduates from 2 different campuses, agriculture campuses from Nepal, which is great. Like David said, we are focusing on young recent graduates to work for farmer and to work with farmer. And for that, to train those gym team in Nepal, Kenya gym team actually, they train those gym team. So here we are actually like increasing the capacity of these young graduates to train other graduates, so that they can learn, the newly established gym team can learn from their experience, their hands-on, because they have hands-on field experience working with the farmer and for the farmer. So they when one young member of the gym team train another member of the gym team from the different country, they actually share their culture, value, and everything with them. And that's like a very good point here.
I mean, it's just really amazing what's happening. I think the differences between, if I get this correct, but I think the differences between countries is greater than the differences between ages. So I think that young people from Nepal and Honduras and Kenya and Mozambique and Tanzania just speak with, and Burkina Faso. So we've also had through translation apps, the ability to communicate between Kenya and Burkina Faso. They just speak to each other so much more easily within their own generation than across generations or across geographies. It's really impressive. As I mentioned earlier, despite of transport and supply chains and COVID, we are running a huge innovation lab project in Kenya across 10 counties that Winkit talked about. And there's no Europeans or Americans involved. It's all Kenyans. And Dr. Chalal is the only one with a PhD. And it's driven by these young people who graduated with degrees in Bachelor of Science degrees in agriculture. And what we are finding, we can increase the capacity. Not only do we train young people and provide jobs, but it's just much, much more effective than the old model. So the old model is typically individuals from, say, North American universities or European universities traveling to one of these countries for a short period of time to conduct some research. But the people who are there all the time are really more well-placed to conduct that research, especially if they have the trust of the local community members. It's also more cost-effective. So I'm often mentioning that a consultant at World Bank, FAO, CG, even USAID, those individuals might be on $650 a day, which is a lot of money. And we can have 37 young people in Kenya for this. So it's just more cost effective, it's more impactful, and it raises the capacity. And it's a bit of an experiment. Of course, we're doing research. So it's an experiment for us to see how well this is working. But the fact that 2 of them are in Mozambique today and have done training is really excellent. So thank you so much for that question. Mladen, you had a question. Do you want to ask it, or do you want me just to say it?
My internet connection is, yeah, so I was just interested in availability of the models that you developed, the data, the code, and you know, to scale it up to other diseases, other places, kind of continuation of the first question. Thank you.
Right. So as laid out in the USAID Global Food Security Strategy, as the research component of that, and which is an annex, and then it's going to be developed further. We need to move towards public goods. Now, thankfully, we're building on Plant Village, which is a global public good. We have set that in place through the Memorandum of Understanding between Penn State University and the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. So, and of course, we've also established that through our long-term partnership with CJR, that's PA, SIP, CIMMYT, IFPRI, and I think that's it. So it is a public good. Now, that doesn't mean that the code is open, because we consider this to be a curated public good. So somebody like can access it, or FAO partners, but we're mindful not just to release it out into the wild, because there could be unintended consequences, or what the economists call negative externalities. So one of the things that we want to do going forward is conduct research on that component as well. I would also take the opportunity to mention that the Innovation Lab is moving at the same time alongside CJR's large plant health initiative, which also has an open framework through the FAIR mandate, which is a component of big data and open data platforms. And when we had been awarded the innovation, the Gates Foundation, which has funded us in the past, have wanted to build upon the success of the Innovation Lab with CJR to invest in a system that not only provides the data, but also enables people to generate their own models, the sort of stuff that Pete has been talking about, and now he's training Milsort in Kemboi in Kenya, who's a computer scientist. So we will be doing that a lot going forward. I think that's a really critical question and important part. Thank you. Okay, great, thank you. Any further questions? Maybe I'll just take a moment to allow for our colleague from ICIPE who joined because of the time zone difference where we changed. But Dr. Abdel Rahman, maybe you could, I have already introduced ICIPE and the work there, so maybe you could just introduce yourself, Dr. Abdel Rahman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Yes, I'm Al-Fatih Abdurrahman. I'm here on behalf of my colleague, Dr. Sudi and Dr. Samira, and I think Emily has already joined. I'm working for Data Management Modeling and Geoinformation Unit at ECP. I'm a geospatial researcher and remote sensing staff as well. We're doing the project together with the bioreactor control specialist, Dr. Sudi and Samira. But myself and Emily are the modelers who are doing the geospatial modeling. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Any final questions before I move on to the next section?
There was a question in the chat from Alizeta. So
the question from our colleagues in Burkina Faso was how to initiate a collaborative research project to enable technology transfer. We'll speak about this in more detail tomorrow, but essentially what we're aiming for is a very low barrier to entry for the request for application process. Essentially, anybody anywhere can write a 2-paragraph introduction via email in English or in their local language, so also in French or Spanish or Nepalese or whatever. And that starts a conversation with us so that we can explore whether that is a project which is suitable for our innovation lab or suitable for some of the priorities. The problem, and I'll emphasize this in a moment, is that we have a lot of current and emerging threats globally, and we can't work on all of them at once. So we're going to have to prioritize and essentially triage, so focus on the biggest issues. So we're going to work with people who suggest those ideas to us. We're also going to focus on smaller projects. We're taking a page out of the Gates Foundation model of these grant challenges, which were small grants of $100,000. So we want to have more of the smaller grants to kickstart some projects and enable capacity development in Feed the Future countries. in terms of the technology transfer, well, that's already available, irrespective of a partner in a Feed the Future country having a grant or not. The technology will be transferred, and that is the technology for primarily for climate change threats, but it also will work with groups like this to work on the IPM strategies or the private sector. So we heard about that Striga Control. That's a private company in Kenya, which came out of research at Montana State University. So we'll work on those things. So of course, innovation labs strongly promote integration between the public and private sectors. So I hope that answered your question, Alizeta. And we'll speak more and in more detail tomorrow about that. Super. Okay. So on with the show. Oh, just while we're here, 43% of our participants are female and 57% are male. So, okay, so we've covered the introduction, and so now we want to talk about what is the mission of the Innovation Lab before coming on to research for development. The mission is rather simple. It's fitter farms in 5 years. And so that implies that things could get worse or could, we hope they're going to get better. So nothing is static. And at least if we look at some of the available evidence, particularly the state of the food index report by, well, it's a multiple agency report, but it's led by UNFAO with the World Food Programme and IFAD, the Rome-based agencies. And this is the one from 2021, and 2022 will be worse. But for the last 4 years, we've seen an increase in food insecurity to about 811 million people who are food insecure. So we've seen great changes since 2005, and those changes are being reversed. And we're seeing an increase in food insecurity. So 118 million people were facing hunger in 2020 and 2019. So we're going in the wrong direction. This trend has been reflected in many other reports. For example, World Bank reports, or the recent IPCC report that came out 2 weeks ago on the status of our adaptation to climate change and the effect that climate change is having globally. The recent Global Food Security Strategy, which has just come out, and really I encourage everybody to read it, in really excellent framework for where USAID is going in the coming years. But I particularly would draw your attention to what Administrator Samantha Power said, because what I spoke about in the previous slide doesn't really bring in the effects of COVID. And what we're seeing based upon a World Bank report that she references is that 97 million people, more people are now on less than $2 a day, and really reflecting a global increase in extreme poverty. So we are absolutely, without doubt, going in the wrong direction. This has really been front and center to my mind since I came to Penn State and started Plant Village, which is now powering the Innovation Lab. I've always, and this is the mural on the wall of one of Penn State's administrative buildings, and it shows the history of the land-grant universities, research and extension. Of course, it features Lincoln, who set up or put into law the land grants in 1862 alongside USDA. And the bit that which really struck me was this quote, which is Lincoln's second inaugural address to Congress, that the dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, we must think anew, we must act anew, we must disenthrall ourselves. I think this quote was also mentioned at the World Food Prize by Secretary Vilsack. And so I think it's very useful as a framing, because we are completely and utterly in uncharted territory. We do have a stormy present, and we have to rapidly adapt and move people out of food insecurity and not continuation of a decline in These points were made by Administrator Power during the Senate hearing before she became administrator, so when she was Ambassador Power, and she talked about 4 interconnected and gargantuan challenges confronting the world at this moment. And she talked about COVID, conflict, climate change, and democratic backsliding. These were the 4 interconnected and gargantuan challenges. And so even despite her deep understanding of European politics and warfare and refugee crisis, I don't think even she in her wildest and darkest imagination would have imagined the situation we currently face ourselves with war in Europe, not only because of the enormous crisis that presents in terms of refugees, 2.5 million refugees now from Ukraine, but the effect it has on the international community focused on food security. Of course, it takes so much money and attention, $2.5 billion or billion euros being promised by the European Union, a lot of aid from USAID and World Food Programme, and that comes at a cost internationally on other issues. We're currently in the worst drought in the Horn of Africa since 1981, and so these are having large knock-on effects. Of course, the major knock-on effect that our colleague at CIMMYT, Dave Hodson, would remind us about is the effect on wheat. Ukraine and to some extent Russia, but predominantly Ukraine with its deep black soils, is a major wheat producing country. I think something like 25% of the world supply. And this is going to have an effect on prices. Some of you might know and remember the Chicago report, which emphasized the 2008 wheat price, which had a strong effect on the Syrian conflict, and we're still the after effect of that wheat price hike. So these knock-on effects are going to be enormous. In addition, there's a knock-on effect through sanctions of fertilizers and pesticides, as well as the increase in oil prices. So all of these are interconnected, exactly as Administrator Power said. And not only are they interconnected, but they are truly gargantuan. We at Plant Village we're very much involved in the locust crisis, and we talk about this often. Frank Doyle, the lead Android engineer, we talk about how in the locust crisis, which happened in COVID, a crisis within a crisis, we had to build the airplane as we learned how to fly. I think the 5 years is building multiple airplanes as we learn how to fly. It really is a challenge. But all is not lost. I think the important point that I would take away from Administrator Power's messages is also that we can take the risk that this moment in history demands. And this was a really important phrase to me during her staff address to USAID, and it does talk about this component from Lincoln of disenthralling ourselves. There is a sense in which we are stuck in an old way, a bureaucratic way, a burdensome way, and this doesn't serve us as we try to tackle these problems. We must take the very best of the land-grant universities and deploy them at scale with local partners to meet these challenges. So I think we absolutely can, if we keep front and center the objectives and remember for whom we work. So we work for farmers under the Global Food Security Act. We're focused on these components that raise farmers and communities out of poverty and move them towards sustainable and profitable livelihoods. So it's possible to do it. We've had great challenges in the past. I'm always remembering the issues around the Dust Bowl in the 1930s, where we were able to leverage from the land grants effectively and from USDA and the national NRCS. In addition, in the 1870s, the United States had its own locust crisis, the Rocky Mountain locust, and farmers were able to deal with that through the support of the land grants as well as USDA. So it is possible, it has happened before, and when we can do it again. So that's why the mission of these innovation lab is focused on very much on an SOS framework. we're in a Mayday call. We're in a troublesome period. It's only going to get worse unless we actively combat that. And the active combating of these current and emerging threats to crops for us, and of course, we just wrote the proposal. Now we're a broader community, so it's going to be a broad collective us. But we must focus on surveillance. You can't fight what you can't see. And then we must also focus on outreach, meaning we must help our country partners in the Ministry for Agriculture, in the CG centers, in FAO, in universities, in TV stations and radio stations. We must help them understand the threat that we've identified. And then we must, of course, roll out solutions. We must be able to help farmers integrate integrated pest management systems into their activities, build up that necessary and important resilience. And so the Fitter Farms in 5 years is divided into two components. One is current threats, and the second is emerging threats. So for the current threats, we want to have the fitter approach, which is to forecast. So what are we expecting to be the problem in, for example, Kenya's long rain season, which is starting now? What's the problem? The problem is drought. How do we inspect that? How do we have these ODK forms? How do we have the use of apps which function in the field to record this? How do we leverage satellites from NASA to determine the soil moisture in the soil? And how do we do training of trainers? We've talked about that already through the Dream Team. How do we use that Dream Team in order to do training in their country, but also between countries? That's working very effectively. And how well is that working? Can we evaluate that? Is it effective? Is it cost effective? How much information is being retained? And we're actually doing research on that as well with partners in order to evaluate that. And then we must also bring in that component that Janelle mentioned, which is the aspect on households, which may be led by women, led by men plus women, as well as research on the effect on young people, and also making sure we are constantly researching this because of some unintended consequences that we can't yet identify. So that's the current threats. For the emerging threats, that's essentially what we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what the next fall armyworm will be, or maize-leaf necrosis, or other problem. And so we will engage in forecasting for that, and something that Cabby mentions, which I like the phrase of, which is horizon scanning. So that's an important part. And then constantly assessing that. That's why we need many eyes on the ground, eyes from young people in the fields with farmers, from the farmers themselves, and then artificial eyes. All of these sensors in smartphones across all of these countries allow us to assess the problem. And then we must make sure we don't repeat the missteps of the past as occurred during the fall armyworm crisis. We must do rapid research, and we must get solutions to the market. And then we must do surveillance in order to understand what the effect of that is on reducing the overall pest. So again, things are different now. We've all lived through 2 years of COVID, and I think everybody understands the importance of flattening the curve, understands the importance of behavioral interventions like spacing or masks, and then biotechnological interventions like vaccines. So there's no excuse that we cannot rise to this occasion that's needed, or take the risks that history demands, as Administrator Power has so eloquently emphasized. So I'll stop there, and we can discuss some of those points before coming on to research if anybody had an immediate question. Okay, I'll move on to research, and then I'll leave time at the end for a more broader discussion. So I mentioned this global food security strategy, and there's an annex in that, which talks about a period of listening that USAID is going to engage in order that we might better understand the importance of research. But I just wanted to put this single slide up here talking about the fundamental criteria that we should see research addressing. So it should be hypothesis driven, of course, testable and independently replicable. So if we were to say that the use of rapid diagnostic tests was able to increase the response by a government to a pest like a wheat rust, that's something that we can test, and we want to be able to measure the effect. We know from the really excellent work that CIMMYT has done through Rust Tracker with country partners in Ethiopia with ATA and others, and then the John Innes Center, that they were able to save, I think, hundreds of millions of dollars in fungicides through the effective forecasting based upon the data they were collecting on the ground. So they would collect data on wheat rust, the presence or absence of it, strain identification, and then use that in conjunction with meteorological models from the UK Met Office, and then also understanding of the spread of the disease based upon epidemiological models from Cambridge University. And then they were able to determine that if they had an intervention now, they would then later on save it. And so it's really, to my mind, a really excellent example of this coordinated approach and the benefits of research. So we want to make sure that we're conducting that and then focusing on clear and actionable hypotheses. The other part, and this is a little bit, to my mind, a difference from research just at a university like Penn State, but having that research within the framework of an innovation lab, we have to have a purpose. And that purpose has been laid down, I think, since 1961 through acts of Congress about how we would focus on impacting the lives of smallholder farmers. The Global Food Security Act of 2006, which is coming up for renewal in 2023, which has been led by our senator here in Pennsylvania, Senator Casey. So we have to have purpose-driven ideas. This means we have to impact smallholder farmers in Feed the Future countries and more broadly. And that means that the research we conduct should have a clear pathway to application. And that's, of course, what we're doing. We mentioned earlier with the work that we're doing between ICIPE and the DREAM team and farmers, and how that is being cascaded out into homes across Kenya and Burkina Faso through TV and radio, as well as being sent out on SMS. So these are important components. Now, once we do that, once we start cascading it out, we then raise more research questions. Does it make a difference? We know from research done by the University of Reading, focus on Shamba Shape Up, we know that the TV show has a strong impact on the behavior of farmers. I think 91% of respondents looking at this said they changed their behavior in some way based upon the knowledge that they had learned about in the TV show. So we have to evaluate that. Is it declining? Is it increasing? Is it more affecting younger people or older people, men versus women? And so these are the components that we have to do. Is it having unintended consequences? So what we don't know what we don't know. So is it having an unintended consequences down the line? That might be increasing, for example, some negative effect on health due to the broad application of pesticides, for example. These are things that we want to continue. So once we find something, as is the beauty of science, we have 10 more questions to answer. And this also gets down to Mladen's question, which is that are these scientifically validated methods? Are they rigorous? Are they transparent? Can anybody examine them? Are they open for the global community? That again is something we've all lived through with COVID. The beauty of huge networks of scientists around the world coming together, working with a collective purpose. It's my own view that the global climate change will show us that COVID, with all its great impacts, almost 6 million people dead, all its great impacts is nothing in comparison to how we're going to have to deal with global climate change and the 500 million smallholder farmers globally. The effects could be much, much worse. And I think that's why we do need to rally the global community together in the same way they came together for COVID vaccines. Now we're in a good position. We're deep and enduring partners with CGIR. Dr. Prasanna is a member of our board. We've talked closely with them throughout the development. We have excellent scientists like Jan Kreutz and Dave Simmet and others that we're working closely with. And CG Systems, that one CGIR, has about 10,000 scientists around the world. Deep enduring legacy. So our job is to help them, and their job is to work with us as we work together to collectively tackle this. So that is a bright light. Specifically, I'm very motivated by one of the approaches that they've had in CG in what was called ProMusa, which was around bananas. And so they really had an excellent way for scientists to come together to work collectively, identifying problems, dealing with it. Now, our other partner is FAO, which of course brings the UN flag and the authority that entails, so that when we do cascade out these solutions, people understand that they are scientifically validated and they're built in a way that maximizes capacity building. So keep in mind the research component. You'll hear us talking about a lot. We of course talk internally with Angela and the team a lot about research for development. We have linked we can put that in the chat. Actually, we have links to that in the document, which is online, and so you can read about the Bureau for Global Food Security. You can read about the research definition there, as well as the annex to the research documents. I think that was an important component I wanted to emphasize. Okay, so that's me stopping talking. We can go through long silences, or people can jump in and ask questions as if you were all sitting at a table with coffee and donuts. How about we have a question from one of our young people, one of our dream team, who would like to go on our dream team and ask a question? So we're planning to spend the next 5 years revolutionizing the world, and so we need questions. But I have one from Frank. Thanks for the link, Melissa. So what crops do we plan to build models for in the near future? So models will be both the phenotypic ones that we talked about, as well as crop water balance models, where we're looking at the soil, water, and the hydrological models, and looking at suitability. For example, maize in sub-Saharan Africa. We're taking the framework of the top 5 crops for each country, and then the top 5 problems of those crops. Now, there's 2 ways to look at the top 5. One is in terms of calories for smallholder farmers, or economic benefit. So crop like maize will be really important in both Uganda and Honduras, so corn and Honduras, but coffee is really important for both countries in terms of GDP. So we have to strike a balance between those components. We might look at cocoa in West Africa. We know that's suffering already strongly from things like black pod disease, Phytophthora palmifera, and also swollen shoot virus. But in addition, it's got a lot of issues around insect pests, and then it's got the compounding issue of climate change. So we can't decide all of this. We need the global community to be part of these. On Wednesday, we'll talk about how we're setting up groups who can advise us and provide content here.
I've got another, if sure. Yeah. So one of the things we try to push is moving people towards cassava because it's a better crop for the situation we're facing with climate change. But people tend to be set in their ways. Trying to convince 1 billion people to do a certain thing is very difficult. How do we balance trying to change what people are doing with supporting what people are going to do anyway? If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So there's a think tank in DC called the World Research Institute, I think. And so they've been doing some reports around this on how people in Central America are moving away from coffee to citrus, I think it is, especially those individuals who are at higher elevation. So with climate change, higher elevations are suffering more. And so I think that like many different things, it all comes down to concepts of diffusion of innovation. So we know this very well in terms of public trends, the latest iPhone or technology, how people adopt it and what they do. So the sociologists are really important here. So some campaigns take off and some don't. For example, the national or international campaign around from Nancy Reagan of just say no, that was largely a failure. It was largely a failure because it was based upon a very small survey in Hawaii that didn't scale out. So a lot of things don't scale. Whereas other campaigns like littering campaigns in Texas were very effective because they used the right language that resonated, like don't mess with Texas. Or the President Bush, the first one, I think, PEPFAR, was very successful in Africa in combating AIDS because it leveraged some components of the local systems and infrastructure. So there are lots and lots of examples. We have to be very mindful not to be a bunch of agronomists focusing on a biological disease, however interesting that is. We must involve the social scientists lockstep, as well as industry. So social scientists or economists like Dr. Abdel Rahman or Dr. Larson are really important, but just as important are Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, and the framework that, how did Google manage to get to 1 billion views on YouTube? I don't know if you want to say something, Annalise, about our framework of measuring and OKRs and how that was important to us.
Of course. So being the large team that we are now, we were not always that way. And so when we started off smaller, it was easy for us to be nimble and capture that adaptive management framework just through our regular day-to-day activities. However, as we began growing our team, as excellent as they are, we realized we needed a stronger support structure to align all across our teams and the mission and vision of what Plant Village is and now the Innovation Lab. And so the best part of our objectives and key results structure is that it cuts across all cultures and language barriers, and we can work within the existing systems that are set up within the teams themselves. And so in order to track and measure our progress and metrics on all of our projects, we align in a weekly meeting and keep it fairly cutthroat, where it's 30 minutes or less, where we remove the brainstorms and just give updates on our weekly projects and keep things moving forward.
Yeah, and this is, there's a well understood issues. It's well researched about scaling, and we have to be careful not to fall prey to that. We do want to, as all innovation labs should, want to work for the maximum benefit across the largest geographies, which is all the Feed the Future countries. And that's easy to write in a grant, hard to execute. And so we think we have some experience here, the sort of experience Annalise talked about, but we're going to have to learn as we go. And that's where open, constant dialogue is so important. Thank you. So thank you, Dr. Subi. Management of emerging threats in new geographies require innovations that are context specific to the new regions. Some of these innovations can easily be adopted from one constraint to the other, building capacity for biological control, digital monitoring of pest and disease constraints. How is the Innovation Lab focused on building these capacities that can cut across constraints? Maybe would anybody like from the Kenyan Dream Team like to answer that, particularly from the perspective of our lab in Alupe? Perhaps Winkett? I can go ahead with that in case, but jump in case your connection allows you to. So what we did, or what they did, the Dream Team, is they worked with the Moi University and set up a lab in a satellite campus, and they engaged carpenters. They built a lab system. They for storing the parasitoids, but also for putting in microscopes, and that's for around identifying the parasitoids that you at ICIPE were so critical for. And of course they worked with Peter Malusi at ICIPE and yourself, Dr. Subi. But we could then add on to that mycology. So we're really interested in looking at foliar diseases of plants, of course, as well as bioherbicides. And to do that, it necessitates the increasing capacity in determining what are different fungal species and the different morphologies. It also is relevant to nematology. So nematodes, as Marisol at MSU will tell us, are one of the biggest problems to global food security. And we don't think about it because it's underground. Marisol, would you like to jump in and just kind of reaffirm that? Yeah, you're muted still, Marisol.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's exactly right, David. What happens with nematodes is that they're underground and they cause, for some crops, they cause the most damage or any other pathogens, like in soybeans. Soybean cyst nematode is the #1 pathogen in North America. For potatoes, if you have potato cyst nematode, and many of the countries we're talking about do have potatoes, if potato cyst nematode is there, then potato cyst nematode becomes the #1 yield limiting pathogen or pest. You could categorize it as both a pathogen or pest in potatoes. And if you have root knot in some susceptible crops like tomatoes, etc., also it could be the #1 yield limiting pathogen. The biggest problem with nematodes is that they're in the soil, in the roots, and with an uninformed grower, it might be a mystery to them. They might think it's problem with water, problem with nutrients, because the above ground, the symptoms look very nondescript, like wilting or yellowing or whatever. So unless you are doing, the person is doing sampling and they're, and since they're microscopic, they won't be able to see the problem or properly diagnose it without an expert. So I agree, nematodes are widely underestimated as a problem in limiting yield and production.
And so as we were thinking about capacity, then we took advantage of a separate ICIPE course before Christmas, I think, where 3 of our members joined that course in order to get deeper training in nematology, which is great. And so we want to make sure that that satellite campus is now capable to do parasitoid wasps, foliar diseases by fungi and water molds, as well as nematodes in one place. And Serge, could you speak to the experience of setting up a new research effort, which was not in the grant, but we just spun it up because of our experiences with nematodes and Dr. Quintanilla?
Yes, with our experience during this courses at the end of the year, last year in December, and also last year, our experience in Kenya is a lot of wilting on the ground, nematodes, and some other soil or borne diseases as well. So we thought to initiate to try some control measure that was already published in the literature in the different farms with the farmers. So the idea is to use this control, this management methods like biochar, using of organic fertilizer, compost, and some other methods just to work with the farmers and see which one worked the best for the situation. So we set up this experiment, we're setting it up now with the new growing Irish potato season in Kenya. And with the farmers, you will see which one works the best for them, because it's kind of recurrent. Every year they will have potatoes or maybe tomatoes on the ground, and we'll have wilting caused by nematodes or bacteria disease. So it's to try which one works the best for them. And we have rotation for sure, but we also don't know how many years it will work in their situation. And we're already starting just sampling the soil and see which kind of pathogen is really there, and try the management method to pick the one that works best for the situation. So it's kind of adaptive research way to check the different published method and see which one works the best for the situation there. Yeah.
Thank you. And so this is run by the Dream Team. Matthew, would you like to add a few words on your experiences here?
David, I think I'm in a place with a lot of noise, but can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Matthew.
Yes, as Saja said, we are starting our treatment plots in Kenya now. We've identified 3 fields as per now, which it was infested by nematodes. We want to try using biochar solarization. We want to also use phylam. It's a nematicide, and so that we can see which one is effective, and of course we can tell our farmers which is the best way to go, so that we can control these nematodes that has been a menace, and it's not known to many farmers in Kenya. Yeah, thank you.
That sounds wonderful. Solarization should work really well in Africa because of the amount of sunlight. I would love if you have a few minutes that we can talk, Matthew, and about the methods to make sure, to work on the details. That sounds wonderful. Congratulations.
Looking forward to. Thank you.
Super, excellent, great. So that kind of speaks to your question, Dr. Subi. We're bringing together domain experts like those at MSU with people on the ground, the Dream Team, and then Serge here at Penn State, trying out these projects and then building the capacity for identifying, because we are the current and emerging threats to crops. So we have to identify things either through traditional approaches of assessing the plant's phenotype and vigor, or looking for the biological agent, which in this case is nematodes or something else, or then doing that genetic components, which are important. Yeah. So the other component that perhaps is not so obvious is building upon the skill sets of those who are really, really good at this. So I don't know, I was going to call upon Diane or Dave, but hopefully Diane, to speak to what it means to be coming from an international center of excellence like the John Innes Center, and what can, if you're focused on rust diseases, what could you offer to water mold diseases of potatoes, or other types of fungal diseases such as those coffee rust. Maybe you could speak to just how skillful your team is and how they bring that benefit.
Yeah, I mean here,
Hello, everyone. My name's Diane Saunders. I'm at the John Innes Centre, and here we develop a lot of techniques and methodology that we can apply. And of course, our interest initially is around the wheat rust, but that doesn't mean that kind of methodology can't be guided to be applied to other situations. And I was very interested in the question earlier about coffee rust and whether or not the Marple diagnostic system could be utilized in that particular context. And that's something that I've been asked about several times. And we're very much here to support people if they wanted to adopt some of the methodology and apply it in other situations, and provide that support. Within this particular project, of course, we're focusing also on capacity building. So making sure that we spread the expertise that we have here more widely, and making sure that we engage with people in various locations to build up capacity in these kind of new and exciting sequencing technologies, in particular for doing rapid diagnostics in genotyping.
Thank you so much. And we want to, it's already been quite apparent in the first 6 months that this interactivity between partners is leading to the ways in which we can answer your question, Dr. Subi, about building capacity. And one of the things we were really happy about was how the donor community has responded, and particularly the Gates Foundation, because they really see the importance of that capacity building, because it means a lot if you're coming from John Innes, that you have about 270 genes that you can use to target a fungal species like those like rusts and so on, in order to identify the phylogenomic position and how problematic that is. There's a lot of domain expertise that comes, and so we want to build on top of that. At the same time, we build capacity in country. So we're really happy that the donors, besides USAID, but now the Gates Foundation, are getting on board with that, which is great. And I think it's partially reflective of the good success that have come out of FAO. I have a follow-on meeting with FAO this morning around the fall armyworm app. And I think we're all collectively understanding that we want to make sure we're leveraging the best capacity. Shushmita asked, as already discussed, about the labs for confirmation of fungus, bacteria or nematodes that is established by the DREAM team. In Nepal, we're just starting off in the starting phase. However, is there any plan for Nepal too about doing lab works in the future in collaboration? So absolutely, we're currently fighting through intense logistical challenges to get the Marple system into Nepal at the moment, and we want to get that Marple system there and have a workshop. I think it's 25th of May or April, in order that we can do that. So that will be one component of diagnostics, but this other component of having labs in, for example, Lamjung campus, where we have some members, building the capacity there. Dr. Tubine is interested in building capacity in DRC labs. So if you look at fast food chains like McDonald's, it's a franchise model where things can be built up rather rapidly in new places by following a set of instructions. Now it can be then optimized a little bit further locally, but if we can put in place these instructions, then we can scale. So absolutely, we're focused on Nepal. That's a very good question, Shasmita. James.
Yeah, I had a question, and this is something that has popped not once in Uganda when interacting with the people from the ministry and also some of the experts in the Ministry of Agriculture. And I would ask it this way: what plans does the Innovation Lab have for the diseases and pests that do not show their effects or symptoms externally, and or those diseases with a very long asymptomatic or latent stage, because most of the times we find that for the AIs, mostly we are dealing with the already exposed symptoms that we can see externally. So what plans do we have for this?
Great. So there, the genetic testing that Diane talked about, Marple, is so important, which is a small sequencing machine that attaches to your computer, and you can isolate some material from the plant and you can sequence it. So you can determine whether a sample is symptomatic or has the pathogen. There's also other tools. So Jean Ristiano at North Carolina State has been working on point of care diagnostics. Other people have worked on spectrophotometry, which can in greening disease, which can diagnose asymptomatic infections. Our partners, the West African Viral Epidemiology Network, are interested in the use of LAMP assays, which is a simple bioassay, essentially like a dipstick or a pregnancy kit, where you just simply put some material on and the color changes, or those rapid COVID tests that we're seeing now. So there's a lot of approaches, and we're really interested in the community coming forward with RFAs saying, hey, I've got something that's really cheap and affordable that can diagnose asymptomatic infections. That's very good. Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Al-Fayed? Al-Fatih?
Thank you, David. Al-Fatih, yes. So yes, I understand that the innovation labs looked at the 5 major crop or main crop, as you mentioned, and the maybe 5 most important threats. So both biotic and abiotic. For the biotic threats, I think there is a lot of discussion and solutions going on. But my question is about abiotic like drought. Would the innovation lab also provide some research or solution to such kind of threats? Thank you.
Yeah, so this is sort of something we're pushing out immediately. So this is the homepage for Kenya, where people can come if they're registered, and they can see the records of diseases. And then this is a map that's delivered to us from FuseNet. And last week it was quite depressing. It was all red, but now we're getting a little bit more rain. So this will be updated daily, but people can also get it into their email or every day as well. And then we can also look at this is a crop water balance model for maize in the 10 counties. So this is how much rain is needed here, but actually, and so we can look across each county. So we built this with FuseNet based upon 40 years of data, looking at analog years. We can also look in our system, in our observatory, where we can look at individual records that do come in, and then we can examine different satellite systems from, oh, that's perfect, isn't it? What isn't that always the case? You're doing a live demonstration and it stops. But we can look at individual records which are coming in, and we can look at the satellite data from those, and we can look at data on crop water balance. We can look at this NASA soil moisture data. So these are aspects that we can interrogate, and we can then figure out whether it's useful for people, so that they can start to benefit from these broader insights that we have. So I think let me just share again. Now, the issue here will be, we don't know what one is going to be effective, but we can look at watering needs, the above ground biomass from WOPR, which is looking at leaf area index and soil moisture. And then the sort of work that Chris at MIT was talking about, but also colleagues here at Penn State, Xiaopeng Shen and others, we can look at spatiotemporal machine learning models to look at the forecasted issues. So collectively, and then with the agronomists at CIMMYT and others, we can then determine how well these are telling us where we can and cannot grow maize, for example, and not only where the abiotic conditions are impactful, but what is the compounding effect of the biotic stressors on the system. So that's a very important thing that we're going to try to understand. Okay, great. So we're coming, Denise from Honduras. In terms of capacity building in Naros, are we planning to somehow account for the high staff rotation we face in developing countries? This is really not only there, but we actually have high staff turnover in FAO. A lot of the engineers we work with might be on contracts. People are always moving around. We see it at the university. So one of the things that we really want to take from computer science is documentation that Derek oftentimes advocates, which is how can you make it so that somebody comes to an issue and can understand what that issue is without having to go and ask the person who built it. So that's really important in computer coding, but it's also important in how do you run a trial? How do you run an IPM system? And so a lot of the work that Annelies as Director of Operations is trying to do is just remove all of these frictions so that everybody can understand, who do I go and ask when I need to answer a question? Or how can we automate it? And so we're very mindful at the Innovation Lab that nobody teaches you how to be a taxi driver anymore. It used to be something you were taught, you had to train for a long time, but now it's a 16-minute video on YouTube and the software helps you to become an Uber driver. And we want to have something similar. So the documentation is there. So when you do have to ask a question, it can be a very direct question, but we're really aware of the problems of institutional memory and what happens when we lose that. Great. Okay, we're at last minute. I think we had some feedback, a feedback question that Annelies was going to pop up. So here it is. Let us know what you think. But otherwise, I think it was a really great kickoff. We're here again tomorrow and Wednesday. So tomorrow we're going to speak about the money, how we're going to give it away. And so we have some ideas, but we want a lot of engagement from the community, of course, about this. So come prepared to talk about that, or you know, be comfortable with the long silences. But please do come and talk about how we should spend the money, how we should invest, what are the priorities. And then on Wednesday we'll talk about some aspects of the threats that we face, diseases, pests, and weeds. As well as the really big threat of climate change. Okay. And while we're waiting, I was hearing back from the engineers in the background that they were running an update. We're constantly putting out new features. So that's the reason why that demonstration didn't go planned. But we'll of course talk about that on Wednesday, the components of the system that allow for climate change adaptation. Okay, we're almost done with the poll. Maybe we should just end that perhaps, and then look at the results. Thank you. Okay, so people enjoyed overall. Look forward to the session. Very informative, which is great. We'll hear more from partners. And then we'll put in, we have the website there. We'll put in the email that people can contact us at as well. And we'll talk about that tomorrow. Okay, so in the interest of time, we'll just bring it to a close. Oh, Annelies, we were going to take a picture. If you can, we'll try this, but put your cameras on and we'll take a screenshot. Okay. My dog will bark in the background to keep us smiling.
All right, I'll need to take 4 screenshots and then put them together because we're so large. So everyone just hold the smiles. Oh, this is great. Okay, and one more. All right, thank you, everyone.
Great, thank you all so much. Thanks to the USA team. Thanks all the partners for coming, and hopefully we'll see many of you tomorrow. Okay, enjoy the rest of your day and wherever you are.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, bye everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.